The lonely wail of a train whistle echoed across the barren Montana landscape as Sarah Holloway clutched her sleeping 4-year-old daughter against her chest, the child's golden curls damp with sweat despite the autumn chill. It was 1887, and everything Sarah owned in the world was contained in a single worn carpet bag at her feet. Everything, that is, except for hope, the one possession that weighed nothing yet, had carried her across half a continent. "Last stop! Timber Creek!" the conductor bellowed, startling little Emma awake. "Are we there, Mama?" the child mumbled, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair and summoned a smile. "Yes, sweetheart, we're here." Though where here truly was remained a mystery. All she knew was the name of the man who had answered her advertisement in the Marriage Gazette. Blake Sullivan, cattle rancher, Timber Creek, Montana Territory. The platform was nearly empty when they disembarked, just a station master and a few townspeople going about their business. Sarah set Emma down, took her hand, and scanned the few faces, searching for the man who had described himself as tall with brown hair and a scar above his right eye. Her stomach knotted with each passing second. "Mrs. Holloway?" Sarah turned to find a young boy of perhaps 12 standing before her, hat in hand. "I'm Sarah Holloway, yes. Mr. Sullivan sent me to fetch you. I'm Timmy. I help out at his ranch." The boy's gaze fell to Emma, who hid partially behind her mother's skirts. "He didn't mention there'd be a little one." Sarah's heart sank. Of course. In her letters, she'd never explicitly mentioned Emma. Fear had kept her from revealing everything, fear that no man would want a ready-made family. Fear that she and Emma would be left with nowhere to go. It had seemed easier to arrive and present the situation in person, when a face-to-face refusal might be harder to deliver. "Is that going to be a problem?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Timmy shrugged. "Not for me to say, madam. The wagon's this way." The journey to the Sullivan Ranch took nearly 2 hours along rutted roads that wound through golden prairie grass and pine-covered hills. Emma, initially fascinated by the vast open country so different from the crowded streets of Chicago, eventually dozed off again, lulled by the wagon's rhythm. "How far is town from Mr. Sullivan's ranch?" Sarah asked, breaking the long silence. "About 8 miles, madam. Mr. Sullivan comes in once a week for supplies and mail." Timmy clicked his tongue at the horses. "He's a good man, keeps to himself mostly but fair, best rancher in these parts." "And his family? Does he have—" "No family, madam, just him since his pa died 3 years back. That's when he took over the ranch." As they crested a hill, Sarah caught her first glimpse of what might become her new home. A sturdy 2-story house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, and a corral where horses grazed. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, and even from a distance the place had a well-tended look that spoke of pride and care. "There he is," Timmy said, pointing to a figure emerging from the barn. Blake Sullivan was indeed tall, his broad shoulders filling out a faded blue shirt rolled up at the sleeves. Even from a distance, Sarah could see he was powerfully built, a man accustomed to physical labor. As the wagon drew closer, she noticed the scar above his right eye just as he'd described. When Timmy pulled the wagon to a stop, Blake approached, removing his hat to reveal dark brown hair in need of a trim. His face was weathered, tanned by the sun, with lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into the distance. Sarah guessed him to be around 30. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the wind in the grass. "Mrs. Holloway." His voice was deep, with a hint of gravel. His eyes, a clear hazel, widened slightly as they fell on Emma, who had awakened and was now staring at him with undisguised curiosity. Sarah's throat tightened. "This is my daughter, Emma. She's 4. Blake's expression revealed nothing as he studied the child, then returned his gaze to Sarah. "You didn't mention a child in your letters." "No," she admitted, "I didn't." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the creak of the windmill turning in the breeze. "I understand if this changes things," Sarah finally said, lifting her chin slightly. "If you'd prefer, Timmy can take us back to town, and I'll find other arrangements." Blake studied her face, then Emma's, then glanced at the small carpet bag. "Is that all you brought?" Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We had to travel light. I have some savings and I can work. I'm a good seamstress and I can cook and— You brought a child, Blake interrupted, his voice oddly soft. And hope, I reckon? Coming all this way, on nothing but letters and promises. Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Blake stepped forward and reached for the carpet bag. Then you've brought everything that matters. He looked at Emma, and his expression softened. Hello there, little lady. You hungry after your journey? Emma nodded solemnly. Mrs. Finch, who helps around the house, made apple pie this morning. Think you might like some? Emma's eyes lit up, and she nodded more enthusiastically. Let's get you both settled then. Blake offered his hand to help Sarah down from the wagon, his calloused palm warm against hers. Welcome to Sullivan's Rest, Mrs. Holloway. Sarah, she corrected gently, please call me Sarah. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or approval. Sarah, he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. And I'm Blake. As he led them toward the house, Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, the first small unraveling of the tight knot of worry she'd carried for so long. The interior of the house surprised Sarah. She'd expected a bachelor's Spartan quarters, but instead found a well-maintained home with solid, comfortable furniture. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, and windows allowed light to stream across polished wooden floors. It was clear that someone, likely Mrs. Finch, took pride in keeping the place in order. Mrs. Finch comes 3 times a week, Blake explained, setting Sarah's bag down in the entryway. She'll be back tomorrow. Until then, I hope you'll find everything comfortable. It's lovely, Sarah said honestly. After their cramped room in Chicago, the spaciousness felt almost decadent. Blake showed them upstairs to 2 adjoining bedrooms, one larger with a double bed, the other smaller with a single bed that appeared recently assembled. I had Timmy, and the hands helped me set up the second room when I got word you were coming, Blake said, a faint hint of color rising to his tanned cheeks. Didn't know about the little one, but it works out, I suppose. You're very kind, Sarah said, touched by his consideration. Most men wouldn't have thought of separate rooms before the wedding. Blake's eyes met hers. I don't know what kind of men you've known, but around here, a man's word and a woman's dignity are still worth something. Emma had already wandered into the smaller room and was examining a handmade wooden rocking horse in the corner. That was mine when I was a boy, Blake said, watching her. Hasn't seen much use in recent years. May I? Emma asked, her small voice hopeful. It's yours now, little lady. Emma's face broke into a delighted smile as she climbed aboard, rocking gently. I'll let you get settled, Blake said, turning back to Sarah. Supper's in about an hour. Nothing fancy, I'm afraid. We don't need fancy, Sarah assured him, and I'd be happy to help with the cooking from now on. Blake nodded. We can work all that out. No rush. You've had a long journey. After he left, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, allowing herself a moment to absorb everything. The room was simply furnished but clean, with a dresser, washstand, and a rag rug that added a touch of color. A window overlooked the ranch yard, and beyond it, rolling hills that seemed to stretch forever. She unpacked their few belongings, 2 dresses and a nightgown, each for herself and Emma, a small wooden box containing her mother's wedding ring and a lock of her father's hair, a Bible, and a cherished book of poetry. Everything else had been sold to finance their journey west. Mama, I'm hungry, Emma announced, having exhausted her initial interest in the rocking horse. Mr. Sullivan said we'd have supper soon. And didn't he mention pie? Sarah smoothed her travel-wrinkled dress and tidied her hair in the small mirror above the washstand. The face that looked back at her seemed both familiar and strange, thinner than it had once been, with shadows under the eyes, but with something new in the expression. Hope, perhaps, or determination. Downstairs, they found Blake in the kitchen, looking somewhat out of his element as he stirred something in a cast-iron pot on the stove. Can I help? Sarah offered. Blake looked relieved. Stew's about ready. Bread's on the table. Not much of a welcome feast, I'm afraid. It smells wonderful. And it did rich with the aroma of beef, onions, and herbs. They ate at a rectangular oak table by the kitchen window. The stew was hearty and flavorful, the bread fresh. Emma, initially shy, gradually warmed up as Blake asked her gentle questions about the train journey and things she had seen along the way. And did you see any buffalo? He asked, passing her a second helping of stew at Sarah's nod of approval. No, sir. Emma replied, "but we saw lots and lots of cows." "Well, some of those might have been mine," Blake said with a smile that transformed his serious face. "Tomorrow, if your mama agrees, I could show you both around the ranch. Maybe introduce you to some horses that are a bit bigger than your rocking horse." Emma's eyes widened. "Real horses?" "The realest. Got one named Sugar, who's especially gentle, good with little ones." Over apple pie, which proved to be as delicious as promised, Blake spoke more about the ranch. 5,000 acres, 300 head of cattle, 6 hands who lived in the bunkhouse, and Timmy, who stayed in a room off the kitchen. "The men are good workers," Blake said. "Loyal. They've stuck with me through some lean times. Things are better now. We've had 2 good years in a row." "How long has your family had this ranch?" Sarah asked. "My father started it in '57. Came out from Pennsylvania with nothing but dreams and determination. Met my mother here. She was teaching at the school in town." A shadow crossed his face. "Lost her to fever when I was 12. Just me and Pa after that, until 3 years ago." "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly, recognizing the grief that still lingered in his voice. "It's hard to lose parents." Blake studied her face. "You too?" Sarah nodded. "My father when I was 16. My mother just last year." "And Emma's father?" The question was gentle, without judgment. Sarah hesitated, her fingers tightening around her fork. This was the moment she dreaded the explanation she'd avoided in her letters. "Emma's father was my husband, Thomas Holloway. We married when I was 18. She glanced at Emma, who was focused on extracting every last crumb of pie from her plate. "He died before Emma was born. An accident at the factory where he worked. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Thomas had indeed died in a factory accident after abandoning her when she told him she was expecting. He'd never even known his child." Blake seemed to sense there was more to the story, but didn't press. "I'm sorry for your loss." The simple words, free of pity or suspicion, loosened something in Sarah's chest. "Thank you." After supper, Blake insisted on washing the dishes while Sarah helped Emma prepare for bed. The child was exhausted from the journey, barely staying awake through her prayers before falling into deep slumber in her new bed. Sarah returned downstairs to find Blake sitting by the fire, a ledger open on his lap. "She's asleep?" he asked, setting the book aside. Sarah nodded, settling into a chair across from him. The excitement and the journey caught up with her. "She seems like a good child." She's... Sarah paused, searching for words. "She's everything to me." Blake nodded, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "I need to be honest with you, Sarah. When I wrote those letters, I was looking for a wife, yes, but also for a partner. Someone to share the work and the rewards of this place." He gestured around them. "It's a hard life sometimes. Winters can be brutal. The work never really ends." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Sarah said quietly. "I believe that. But with a child..." He ran a hand through his hair. "What I'm trying to say is, I understand if you need time, to be sure. About me, about this place being right for both of you." Sarah studied him, this tall, serious man, who had welcomed them, despite the surprise of Emma, who had thought to prepare a room for her before they'd even met. "Why did you answer my advertisement?" she asked suddenly. "There must have been others." Blake looked into the fire for a long moment. "Your letter wasn't like the others. No fancy words or promises, just honest. Said you were looking for a good man and a fresh start." He met her eyes. "I thought maybe I could be that man. That maybe we could build that start together." The simplicity of his answer touched her. "I'd like that chance," she said softly. "For both of us." Blake nodded, something like relief crossing his features. "The preacher comes through town every 3rd Sunday. That's in 4 days. Would that be enough time for you to be sure?" "Yes," Sarah said, realizing as she spoke that she meant it. This man, this place, it already felt more like home than anywhere had since her parents died. Blake stood and moved to a small desk in the corner, returning with a small wooden box. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band. "If you'll have it." Sarah's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "It's beautiful. Like I said, no rush. Think on it. Make sure." He closed the box and placed it on the small table beside her. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night, Blake." Long after he had gone upstairs, Sarah sat by the dying fire, the small box open in her palm, the gold band catching the last glimmers of firelight. It wasn't how she had imagined this day would end when she boarded the train in Chicago, but somehow it felt right. Outside, the vast Montana night spread over the ranch, stars glittering in a clarity she'd never seen in the city. Inside, for the first time in years, Sarah felt the slow unfurling of peace. The first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains when Sarah awoke. For a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, she lay still, listening. The house was quiet except for Emma's soft breathing from the adjoining room, and, from somewhere downstairs, the gentle clink of cookware. Dressing quickly in her second dress, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days, Sarah checked on Emma, who was still sound asleep, her cheeks flushed with the deep slumber of childhood. Downstairs, she found Blake at the stove, frying bacon and looking almost as uncomfortable as he had the previous evening. "Good morning," she said, startling him slightly. "Morning." He gestured to the stove. "Hope I didn't wake you. The men will be in for breakfast soon, and I usually—" He trailed off, seeming uncertain. "You usually cook for them?" "Mrs. Finch does when she's here. Otherwise, we manage." Sarah rolled up her sleeves. "Why don't you let me take over? It seems only fair since you're providing the roof over our heads." Relief crossed Blake's features. "You sure? You just arrived yesterday." "I'm sure. Consider it my way of earning my keep until we're—" She hesitated, then finished, "until things are more official." Blake studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Though you should know, you don't have to earn your keep. Not like that." As she took his place at the stove, their hands brushed briefly, sending an unexpected warmth through her fingers. Blake cleared his throat and stepped back. "Coffee's ready at least," he said. "The men like it strong." "So did my father," Sarah replied with a small smile. "I know how to make coffee that'll put hair on a man's chest, as he used to say." Blake's answering smile transformed his serious face, creating crinkles at the corners of his eyes. "I'd better warn the men then." By the time Emma came downstairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes, Sarah had breakfast well in hand: bacon, eggs, and a batch of biscuits she'd found the makings for in the pantry. The bunkhouse cook had brought over a pot of beans and some leftover cornbread as well. The ranch hands filed in 4 weathered men, ranging in age from perhaps 20 to 50, plus Timmy. They removed their hats upon seeing Sarah and Emma, nodding respectfully. "Boys, this is Mrs. Holloway and her daughter Emma," Blake introduced. "They arrived yesterday from Chicago." "Madam," the oldest of the men said, touching his forehead in a gesture of respect. "Pete Williams. Been with the Sullivans since before the boss here could ride a horse." The others introduced themselves as well. Sam Forrester, a lanky man with a drooping mustache. Hank Miller, younger with freckles scattered across his sunburned face. And Joe Cooper, broad-shouldered with kind eyes. "Boss said you might be staying on," Pete continued, accepting a plate from Sarah. "We're pleased to have some feminine company around here. Been nothing but men and cattle for too long." "Thank you," Sarah replied. "I hope I won't disappoint." "Anything's better than the boss's cooking," Sam said with a wink, then quickly added, "No offense, boss." Blake's lips twitched. "None taken. I know my limitations." The men ate heartily, complimenting Sarah on the biscuits especially. Emma, initially shy around so many strange men, gradually warmed up when Pete showed her a small wooden horse he'd whittled. "Got a granddaughter about your age back in Kansas," he told her. "Make these for her whenever I visit." "It's beautiful," Emma said, running her small fingers over the smooth wood. "You keep it, little lady. I can make another." After breakfast, the men returned to their work, and Blake offered to show Sarah and Emma around the ranch. Emma, excited by the prospect of seeing real horses, practically skipped alongside them as they walked to the corral. "This here's Sugar," Blake said, leading a dappled gray mare to the fence. "Gentlest horse on the place." Emma's eyes widened as Blake lifted her up to sit on the top rail, his large hands ensuring she was secure. "Can I touch her?" "Sure can. Just be gentle, like this." He demonstrated, stroking the horse's neck with a flat palm. Emma copied him, her small hand pale against the gray coat. "She's soft." "She likes you," Blake said, as the horse nuzzled Emma's arm. Horses know good people when they meet them. The morning passed swiftly as Blake showed them the rest of the ranch. The barn with its sweet hay smell, the chicken coop where Emma delighted in collecting still warm eggs, the vegetable garden that provided much of their fresh food in summer, and the smokehouse where meat was preserved for winter. "It's bigger than I imagined," Sarah admitted, as they walked back toward the house for the midday meal. 5,000 acres is a fair piece of land, Blake agreed. My father started with just 500. Built it up over the years. Pride tinged his voice. Another few good seasons, and I'm hoping to expand the herd further. You love it here, Sarah observed. Blake looked out over the rolling grassland, the distant mountains' blue shadows on the horizon. Can't imagine being anywhere else. It gets in your blood, this land. As they approached the house, a wagon was pulling up a plump, gray-haired woman at the reins. "Mrs. Finch," Blake called, "you're early today." "Heard you had company, Mr. Sullivan. Couldn't very well leave you to manage on your own, could I?" The woman climbed down, her sharp eyes taking in Sarah and Emma with undisguised curiosity. "So, the mail-order bride arrived, did she? And with a little one in tow." Sarah felt her cheeks warm at the blunt description, but held out her hand. "Sarah Holloway, and this is my daughter, Emma." Mrs. Finch's handshake was firm, her palm calloused from years of work. "Martha Finch, been keeping house for the Sullivans since this one was in short pants." She jerked her head toward Blake. "Good to see a woman finally joining the household. Been telling him for years he needed a wife." "Mrs. Finch," Blake said, a warning in his tone. The older woman waved him off. "Oh, hush. No sense dancing around it. That's why she's here, isn't it?" She turned back to Sarah. "Well, come along then. Let me show you the kitchen properly. No doubt he's told you nothing useful." Despite her brusque manner, Sarah found herself warming to Mrs. Finch as the woman showed her through the house, pointing out where everything was kept, explaining the peculiarities of the stove, needs more wood on cold mornings, and offering forthright opinions on everything from laundry, best done early before the heat, to Blake himself, stubborn as his father, but twice as kind. "He's a good man," Mrs. Finch said, as they sorted through linens in the upstairs hall. "Lonely, though he'd never admit it. Lost too many people too young." She fixed Sarah with a penetrating look. "I hope you're not planning to add to that tally." "I have no intentions of hurting him," Sarah replied carefully. "Good, because that child of yours has already started working on his heart. Saw it in his eyes when he was watching her with that horse." Mrs. Finch folded a sheet with practiced efficiency. "Man's always wanted a family. Just never found the right woman to start one with." The conversation gave Sarah much to think about as she helped prepare the evening meal, a savory beef stew that would simmer all afternoon, releasing mouth-watering aromas throughout the house. Mrs. Finch, for all her forthright manner, proved to be an excellent teacher, showing Sarah how to manage the kitchen in a house this size, where food supplies were kept, and which vegetables in the garden were ready for harvesting. Blake was absent most of the afternoon, having ridden out with the men to check on a section of fence that needed repair. When he returned just before sundown, his clothes were dusty and he looked tired but satisfied. "Fence is fixed," he reported as he washed up at the pump outside the kitchen door. "Should hold now, even if those Anderson cattle try to break through again." "Neighbors?" Sarah asked, setting the table while Emma carefully folded napkins beside her. "Of a sort. Their land borders ours to the north. Old Jacob Anderson's not a bad sort, but his sons." Blake shook his head. "They don't maintain their fences, and their cattle are always straying onto our grass." "Troublemakers," Mrs. Finch added, tasting the stew one last time before pronouncing it ready. "Those boys been causing problems since they were knee-high to grasshoppers." After a hearty supper, Mrs. Finch departed for her own home in town, leaving behind fresh bread for the morning and firm instructions for Sarah about tomorrow's tasks. Blake saw her off, then returned to find Sarah and Emma by the fire, Emma nodding sleepily as Sarah read to her from their worn copy of Mother Goose. "Someone looks ready for bed," Blake observed, his voice gentle. Emma's head jerked up. "Not sleepy," she protested, even as her eyelids drooped. "Of course not," Blake said seriously. "But Sugar the horse told me she was hoping you'd visit her again tomorrow. Might need your rest for that." Emma considered this logic, then nodded. I should sleep then. For sugar. Smart thinking, Blake agreed, and Sarah caught the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. After settling Emma upstairs, Sarah returned to find Blake at his desk, ledger open before him, a small frown of concentration creasing his forehead. He looked up at her approach. Sorry, just finishing the accounts. Don't apologize. It's your home. Sarah hesitated, then asked, Is everything all right? With the ranch? Blake closed the ledger. Just planning. Winter's coming, and there's always more to do than time to do it. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please, sit. Sarah did, smoothing her skirts nervously. The small wooden box containing his mother's ring sat on the edge of the desk, a reminder of the decision before her. I've been thinking, Blake began, his voice steady, about what I said last night, about giving you time. Sarah's heart stuttered. Had he changed his mind? Did he want them to leave? I meant it, he continued. You should have time to be sure. But I also want to be clear about my intentions. He met her eyes directly. I invited you here as a potential wife, and that hasn't changed because of Emma. If anything, he paused, seeming to search for words. If anything, seeing you with her only confirms what I suspected from your letters, that you're a woman of strength and character. Relief washed through Sarah. Thank you. That means a great deal to me. There's something else you should know. Blake's expression grew more serious. I can't offer you the kind of life you might have had in Chicago, no theaters or fancy shops. The winters here are harsh. Sometimes we're snowed in for weeks. The work is never ending. I didn't come west looking for an easy life, Sarah said quietly. I came looking for a good one, for Emma and for myself. Blake nodded slowly. I believe we could build that together. A good life. So do I. The certainty in her own voice surprised Sarah. After just one day, how could she be so sure? And yet, watching him with Emma, seeing the respect his men had for him, the way he spoke of the land, it all painted a picture of a man worth joining her life to. The preacher comes Sunday, Blake reminded her. But if you need more time. Sunday will be fine, Sarah said, her decision made. Blake's expression lightened, a cautious hope entering his eyes. You're sure? In answer, Sarah reached for the wooden box, opening it to reveal the simple gold band inside. I would be honored to wear your mother's ring. Blake's calloused fingers were surprisingly gentle as he took the ring and slid it onto her finger. It was slightly loose, but not enough to fall off. We can have it sized properly in town, he said, his eyes fixed on the gold band against her skin. It's perfect as it is, Sarah assured him, unexpectedly moved by the moment. This wasn't how she had imagined her second engagement would be, no flowery declarations or grand gestures, just this quiet exchange of promises beside a desk stacked with ranch accounts. Yet, it felt right, solid and true, like the man himself. Blake's hand covered hers, warm and strong. I'll do my best to be a good husband to you, Sarah, and a good father to Emma. I know you will, she said softly. And somehow, despite having known him for just one day, she did know it as certainly as she knew the sun would rise over those distant mountains tomorrow. The next 3 days passed in a flurry of activity as Sarah settled into life at the ranch. Mrs. Finch came daily, ostensibly to help with household tasks, but clearly also to satisfy her curiosity about the newcomers. Her initial wariness gave way to approval as she observed Sarah's willingness to work and learn. You'll do, she declared on the third day, watching Sarah knead bread dough with practiced hands. Got a good head on your shoulders and not afraid of hard work. The boss chose well. Thank you, Sarah replied, secretly pleased by the older woman's endorsement. Though I think luck had more to do with it than his choosing. Nonsense! That man's turned down 3 potential brides before you. Letters came, he read them, sent polite refusals. Mrs. Finch sniffed. Too picky, I told him. But seems he knew what he was waiting for. This revelation startled Sarah. He never mentioned other letters. Would you expect him to? Not the sort to boast or compare. Mrs. Finch began slicing vegetables for stew with practiced efficiency. So, what made you answer his advertisement? Pretty woman like you could have had suitors back east, I imagine. Sarah considered how much to share, then decided on honesty. After my mother died, There wasn't much keeping us in Chicago. The factory work was killing me slowly, and no decent man there wanted to take on another man's child. She kneaded the dough more vigorously. Blake's letter was different from the others. No grand promises, just honesty about the work and the life here. It felt real. Mrs. Finch nodded approvingly. That's Blake Sullivan all over. Real as the ground beneath your feet. Emma, meanwhile, had blossomed in the open spaces of the ranch. Each morning after breakfast, she begged to visit Sugar, and Blake always found a few minutes to take her to the corral, lifting her onto the gentle mare's back and leading them in slow circles. Sarah watched from the porch, her heart expanding at the picture they made, Emma's delighted giggles, Blake's patient instruction, his large hand protectively on the child's back. On the afternoon before the preacher's arrival, Blake found Sarah in the garden, harvesting late carrots and potatoes for winter storage. "Got something to show you and Emma," he said, a hint of excitement in his normally composed demeanor. "If you can spare the time." "Of course." Sarah brushed dirt from her hands and called to Emma, who was helping by digging enthusiastically in a patch of soft earth nearby. Blake led them not to the barn or corral as she expected, but toward the house and around to a small shed attached to the back that Sarah hadn't fully explored yet. "Close your eyes," he instructed Emma, who giggled and complied, covering her face with dirty hands. "You too," he added to Sarah with a hint of shyness. Curious, Sarah closed her eyes, hearing the creak of the shed door opening, then Blake's footsteps returning. "All right, open them." Sarah opened her eyes to find Blake standing before them, holding a small, wriggling puppy with floppy ears and a coat of mottled brown and white. Emma gasped, her eyes growing round. "A puppy!" "Daisy's litter from last month," Blake explained. "This little lady needs a home. Thought she might like living with you two. Can we keep her, Mama, please?" Emma was already reaching for the puppy, who responded by attempting to lick her face. "She'll need training," Blake added, "but she's smart. Good stock from Daisy, who's the best cattle dog on the place." Sarah looked from the puppy to Blake's face, hopeful, a bit uncertain, wanting to please. In that moment, she saw clearly what kind of father he would be to Emma, thoughtful, generous, finding joy in her happiness. "Of course we can keep her," Sarah said, her heart full. "What shall we name her, Emma?" Emma considered this seriously as she cradled the squirming puppy. "Flower," she decided, "because she's spotty like the flowers in the meadow." "Flower it is," Blake agreed, his eyes meeting Sarah's over Emma's head, warm with shared pleasure in the child's delight. That evening, after Emma was asleep with Flower, curled at the foot of her bed, Blake and Sarah sat before the fire, companionable in their shared anticipation of tomorrow's ceremony. "I had Timmy take a telegram to town today," Blake said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Ordered material from the Mercantile in Billings, for curtains and such. Mrs. Finch mentioned you're a fine seamstress." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Sarah smiled. "That's very kind. The house is lovely as it is, but yes, some curtains would be nice for winter." "Ordered something else, too." Blake looked uncharacteristically self-conscious. "A proper bed for Emma. Carved one, like children have back east. Should arrive in a few weeks." Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. "Blake, you don't have to want to," he interrupted gently. "Want her to feel this is her home, too. Not just a place she's staying." "Thank you." The simple words seemed inadequate for the fullness in her heart. For everything. Blake reached for her hand, his callous thumb brushing over his mother's ring on her finger. "Never thought I'd have this," he admitted, voice low. "A family. After Pa died, figured it would just be me and the land until the end." "And now?" Sarah asked softly. His eyes, amber in the firelight, held hers. "Now, I'm counting the hours until I can call you my wife." The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect autumn day. Mrs. Finch arrived early, bustling with importance and carrying a bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Can't have you getting married in a traveling dress," she declared, thrusting the package at Sarah. "This was my daughter's. She's in Oregon now, married to a timberman. Won't miss it, and it should fit you well enough." Inside was a dress of soft blue wool, simply cut, but with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. "Mrs. Finch, I couldn't possibly—" "Nonsense. Consider it a wedding gift. Now hurry and change. Preacher Matthews will be here by 11, and the men are already getting cleaned up." The dress fit remarkably well, needing only a slight taking in at the waist, which Sarah managed quickly with a few deft stitches. Mrs. Finch helped arrange her hair, weaving late-season wildflowers into the dark strands. Emma, excited by the festive atmosphere, submitted to having her own hair brushed and braided, wearing her best dress, the one Sarah had carefully preserved for special occasions. "You look like a princess, Mama," she declared when Sarah emerged fully dressed. "And you look like a perfect flower girl," Sarah replied, adjusting Emma's collar. "Remember what we practiced? You'll walk in front of me, carrying your flowers." Emma nodded solemnly, taking her responsibilities seriously. The ceremony took place in the main room of the house, cleared for the occasion. Preacher Matthews, a tall man with kind eyes and iron gray hair, arrived precisely at 11, shaking Blake's hand warmly. "About time, Sullivan," he said with a smile. "Been waiting years to perform this service for you." The ranch hands had cleaned up impressively, hair slicked down, faces freshly shaved, wearing their Sunday best. They stood in a respectful semicircle as Mrs. Finch played a simple melody on the small piano in the corner, a song Sarah recognized as "Amazing Grace." Emma walked ahead, scattering flower petals from the garden with careful precision. Sarah followed, her eyes finding Blake's across the room. He stood tall and straight, freshly shaven, wearing a clean black suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. The look in his eyes as he watched her approach made her breath catch wonder, tenderness, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Preacher Matthews spoke of commitment, partnership, and building a life together on foundations of respect and care. When it came time for the vows, Blake's strong voice didn't waver, promising to cherish and protect Sarah all the days of his life. When Sarah spoke her own vows, she was surprised by the steadiness of her voice and the certainty in her heart. This wasn't the romantic love she'd dreamed of as a girl, but it was something equally powerful, a choice made with clear eyes and full understanding, a commitment built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "By the authority vested in me," Preacher Matthews concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Blake, you may kiss your bride." Blake's kiss was gentle, almost tentative, a promise rather than a passion, but it stirred something unexpected in Sarah's heart nonetheless. When they turned to face the small gathering, as Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, the genuine happiness on the faces around them was a gift Sarah hadn't anticipated. Mrs. Finch had prepared a wedding feast that would be talked about for months to come: roast beef, mashed potatoes, 3 kinds of vegetables from the garden, fresh bread, and an apple pie that filled the house with its cinnamon fragrance. The men ate heartily, offering awkward but sincere congratulations. Pete presented Emma with another carved horse to join her collection, and Timmy shyly handed Sarah a bouquet of late wildflowers. "Made these for you, Madam Mrs. Sullivan," he corrected himself with a blush. "They're beautiful, Timmy. Thank you." Sarah tucked one of the blossoms into Emma's hair, making the child beam with pride. As the afternoon waned, Preacher Matthews took his leave, followed by Mrs. Finch, who had her own family waiting in town. The ranch hands drifted back to the bunkhouse, leaving Blake, Sarah, and Emma alone in the suddenly quiet house. "Well, Mrs. Sullivan," Blake said, the new name sounding both strange and right on his lips. "Welcome home." That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah stood in the bedroom, their bedroom now, brushing her hair with long, nervous strokes. She wore her best nightgown, simple white cotton with a touch of lace at the collar that had been her mother's final gift to her. When Blake entered, he had changed into clean trousers and a fresh shirt, his hair still damp from washing. They regarded each other awkwardly for a moment, new territory stretching before them. "You look beautiful," Blake said finally, his voice low. "Thank you." Sarah set down the brush, her hands suddenly unsure what to do. Blake moved to the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. "I meant what I said in those vows today. I'll always respect you, Sarah. That includes now." He turned to face her. "If you need time—" "No," Sarah interrupted softly. "I don't need time. We're married now, truly married." Something flickered in Blake's eyes, relief, desire, gratitude, and he crossed the room to stand before her. Gently, giving her every chance to pull away, he cupped her face in his calloused hands. "I never thought I'd have this," he murmured. "Never thought I'd have you." When he kissed her this time, it wasn't the chaste kiss of the ceremony, but something deeper, a seal on promises made and a beginning of promises to keep. Sarah's arms went around his neck, drawing him closer, her body responding to his with a naturalness that surprised her. Later, in the quiet darkness, Blake's arm strong around her waist and his breathing deep and regular beside her, Sarah stared at the ceiling and marveled at the strange paths life could take. A month ago, she had been a desperate widow in Chicago, searching for any escape from grinding poverty. Tonight, she was Sarah Sullivan, wife of a Montana rancher, mistress of 5,000 acres, with a future stretching before her as vast as the prairie outside. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was respect, kindness, and possibility. It was a beginning. The weeks following the wedding settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. Sarah embraced her role as mistress of the ranch, managing the household with an efficiency that even Mrs. Finch grudgingly admired. The materials Blake had ordered arrived, and Sarah set about making curtains for the windows and new cushions for the chairs, adding touches of comfort and color to the solid masculine house. Emma thrived in her new environment, following Blake around whenever he would allow it, pestering the ranch hands with endless questions, and doting on Flower, who grew with alarming speed from a roly-poly puppy to a gangly half-grown dog. The promised bed arrived an exquisite piece of craftsmanship, with carved roses twining up the posts, and Emma declared it the most beautiful bed in the whole wide world. Winter approached with a quickening pace. The cattle were brought down from the high summer pastures, the garden harvested and preserved, woodpiles stacked high against the coming cold. Blake worked from dawn to dusk, often returning so tired he could barely eat before falling into exhausted sleep. Yet even in his exhaustion, he never failed to ask about Sarah's day, to listen to Emma's excited recounting of her adventures, to thank Sarah for the meals and comforts she provided. In those quiet evening moments, sharing the day's events before the fire, something was growing between them, a partnership deeper than Sarah had dared to hope for, a foundation for the feelings that were taking root in her heart. The first snow fell in mid-November, transforming the landscape overnight into a pristine white wonderland. Emma, who had never seen more than the grimy slush of Chicago streets, was enchanted. "Can I go out in it, Mama? Please?" she begged at breakfast, her nose pressed to the window glass. "After your lessons," Sarah promised. Emma had started learning her letters and numbers, with Sarah devoting an hour each morning to basic schooling. Blake, pulling on his heavy coat by the door, smiled at Emma's impatience. "Tell you what, little lady, you finish your lessons and I'll take you for a sleigh ride this afternoon. Gotta check the north pasture anyway." Emma's squeal of delight brought an answering grin to Blake's face. And as he bent to kiss Sarah goodbye, a habit that had developed naturally over the weeks, his eyes held a warmth that made her breath catch. "Be careful out there," she said, straightening his scarf. "Always am." His gloved hand covered hers briefly. "Won't be late." The promised sleigh ride was a success, with Emma returning rosy-cheeked and bubbling with excitement about the deer they'd seen and how Sugar had pulled the sleigh faster than the train. November gave way to December, and thoughts turned to Christmas. It would be Emma's first real Christmas with presents and celebration. The previous year, with Sarah's mother recently deceased and their circumstances dire, there had been little to mark the occasion. "What did your family do for Christmas?" Sarah asked Blake one evening as they sat before the fire, Emma already asleep upstairs. "Not much after Ma died," Blake admitted. "Pa wasn't one for celebrations, but before that." A smile touched his lips. "Ma would decorate with pine boughs and red ribbons, always had a special dinner, and she'd make sure there was at least one gift for me, no matter how tight things were." "I'd like to continue that tradition," Sarah said, "for Emma and for us." Blake's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "I'd like that too." The week before Christmas, Blake disappeared for an entire day, returning at dusk with the wagon loaded with pine boughs, holly berries, and to Emma's delight, a small pine tree. "For inside?" she asked incredulously as Blake carried it into the house. "That's right. Your mama's going to show us how to decorate it, aren't you, Sarah?" Sarah, touched by his thoughtfulness, nodded. "We'll make it beautiful." And they did, using popcorn strings, paper stars that Emma cut out with Sarah's help, and small carved wooden ornaments that Pete contributed from his seemingly endless supply of whittling projects. The simple decorations transformed the house, filling it with the fresh scent of pine and the spirit of the season. On Christmas Eve, after Emma was asleep, dreaming of the small gifts hidden in Sarah's trunk, Blake presented Sarah with a package wrapped in brown paper. "Should wait until tomorrow," he said, suddenly shy, "but wanted to give you this when it was just us." Inside was a shawl of the softest wool Sarah had ever felt, dyed a deep blue that matched her eyes. "Blake, it's beautiful. Ordered it from the catalog. Woman at the mercantile helped me pick the color." He watched as she wrapped it around her shoulders. "Suits you. I have something for you, too." Sarah retrieved a package from her sewing basket, a new shirt she'd made him, using fabric ordered from Billings, cut to fit his broad shoulders perfectly. Blake ran his hand over the careful stitching. "No one's made me clothes since my mother died. Do you like it?" "Like it?" He looked up, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Sarah, He seemed to struggle for words, then simply pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Thank you." That night, as snow fell softly outside their window, Blake and Sarah made love with a tenderness that spoke of deepening feelings neither had yet put into words. Afterward, as she lay in the circle of his arms, Sarah realized with quiet certainty that what had begun as a practical arrangement had grown into something she'd never expected to find again. Love. Christmas Day dawned bright and cold, with sunlight glittering on the snow-covered landscape. Emma woke early, bursting into their room, with Flower at her heels, too excited to contain herself. "Has Santa been here? Did he find us all the way in Montana?" Blake, who had insisted on playing along with the Santa tradition despite his initial confusion about it, winked at Sarah. "I don't know. Let's go downstairs and see." The small pile of gifts beneath the decorated tree might have seemed modest by city standards, but to Emma it was a treasure trove. A doll with a china face and real hair, a new book of stories, warm mittens Sarah had knitted, and most exciting of all, a tiny saddle from Blake. "A real saddle? For me?" Emma's eyes were saucers. "For when you're ready to ride sugar on your own," Blake explained. "Come spring, we'll start your lessons proper." "Oh!" Emma threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him backward. "Thank you, Papa." The room went still. It was the first time Emma had called him that. Blake's eyes met Sarah's over the child's head, emotions too complex for words passing between them. "You're welcome, sweetheart," he said finally, his voice husky as he returned the embrace. The rest of the day passed in a haze of happiness. A special dinner with the ranch hands joining them, games by the fire, and Emma insisting on carrying her new doll everywhere, introducing Lily to every person and animal on the ranch. That night, after Emma was finally asleep, her new treasures arranged carefully around her bed, Blake and Sarah stood together at the window, watching snow begin to fall again in the moonlight. "She called me Papa," Blake said quietly, wonder still in his voice. "Is that all right?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer from his reaction. "All right?" Blake turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Sarah, when you stepped off that train with nothing but that carpet bag and Emma and hope in your eyes, I thought you'd brought so little, but you brought everything, everything that matters." He touched her cheek gently. "You made this house a home, you and Emma." Sarah leaned into his touch. "You've given us so much, Blake. Security, comfort, a future. And you've given me a family." His voice was low, intense. "Something I never thought I'd have." Sarah's heart swelled with emotion too large for her chest. "I love you," she said simply, the words she'd been holding back for weeks, finally finding voice. "I didn't expect to, but I do." Blake's eyes darkened. "Say it again." "I love you, Blake Sullivan." His kiss was fierce, possessive, full of joy and promise. "And I love you, Sarah Sullivan, have for weeks now. Maybe since the moment you stepped off that train." As snow continued to fall, blanketing the world outside in pristine white, Sarah and Blake held each other close, secure in the knowledge that what had begun as a practical arrangement had blossomed into something far more precious. A love built on respect, partnership, and the daily choice to build a life together. Spring came late to Montana in 1888, but when it arrived, it brought an explosion of life and color to Sullivan's Rest. The prairie burst into bloom with wildflowers in every hue. Cattle grazed on the fresh green grass, and the days lengthened, filled with the endless tasks of ranch life. True to his word, Blake began teaching Emma to ride properly once the weather warmed. Sarah watched from the corral fence as he patiently instructed the child, his hands steady on the reins, his voice calm and encouraging. Emma took to riding with natural ability, her small face serious with concentration, as she learned to guide Sugar with subtle movements of the reins. "She's a natural," Blake said proudly as Emma completed a circuit of the corral unassisted for the first time. "Got a good seat and steady hands." "Like her father," Sarah replied, the words coming naturally now. In the months since their wedding, Blake had become Emma's father in every way that mattered, his love for the child evident in countless small gestures, the patient answers to endless questions, the wooden toys that appeared on her bed, the way he carried her on his shoulders when her legs grew tired on walks. Their little family had settled into rhythms that felt as natural as the changing seasons. Each morning, Blake kissed Sarah and Emma goodbye before heading out to work with the men. Sarah managed the household, tended the vegetable garden that would feed them through the next winter, and continued Emma's lessons. In the evenings, they gathered around the table to share the day's events, then often sat on the porch watching the sunset, paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. It was a good life, better than Sarah had dared to hope for when she answered Blake's advertisement. The work was hard, yes, but satisfying. The isolation that had worried her proved less difficult than expected. Trips to town became social occasions to look forward to, and Mrs. Finch's regular visits brought news and gossip from beyond the ranch boundaries. As spring ripened into early summer, Sarah began to suspect a new blessing was on its way. Her monthly courses, regular as clockwork since Emma's birth, failed to appear. Familiar symptoms, tender breasts, a persistent queasiness in the mornings confirmed her suspicions. By June, she was certain. She was carrying Blake's child. She kept the news to herself at first, wanting to be absolutely sure before sharing it with Blake. One evening in late June, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies rise from the grass, Emma already asleep upstairs, Sarah decided the time had come. "Blake," she began, her hand finding his in the gathering darkness, "I have something to tell you." He turned to her, his expression open, attentive. "What is it?" "I'm going to have a baby, our baby, around January, I think." Blake went very still, his eyes searching her face in the fading light. "A baby," he repeated, as if testing the word. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his features, transforming his face with joy. "A baby. Our baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of precious glass. "Are you sure? Are you feeling all right?" Sarah laughed against his chest. "Yes, I'm sure. And yes, I'm feeling fine. A little tired, a little queasy in the mornings, but that's normal." Blake's hand moved to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "A child of our own," he murmured, wonder in his voice. "Emma will be excited to be a big sister." "I think so too," Sarah agreed. "We should tell her soon, before she notices I'm feeling unwell in the mornings." They told Emma the next day, sitting her down after breakfast for a family discussion. Her reaction was everything they had hoped for, pure excitement. "A baby brother or sister? For real?" Her eyes widened. "When is it coming?" "Not until winter," Sarah explained. "Babies take a long time to grow before they're ready to be born." Emma considered this information solemnly. "I hope it's a brother," she decided. "Then I can teach him to ride when he gets bigger." Blake laughed, ruffling her hair. "That's thinking ahead, little lady. But yes, you'll be a fine teacher, whether it's a brother or sister." The news spread quickly through the ranch and then to town, bringing congratulations and, from Mrs. Finch, a flood of practical advice about pregnancy and childbirth. "Need to fatten you up," she declared, eyeing Sarah critically. "Skinny women have harder deliveries, and we'll need to arrange for Doc Patterson to be ready when your time comes." Sarah accepted the advice gratefully, especially as the summer heat made her more tired than usual. Blake, noticing her fatigue, hired a local girl, Jenny Carter, to help with household tasks 3 days a week, allowing Sarah more time to rest. "You don't have to do that," Sarah protested when Jenny first arrived. "I'm pregnant, not ill." "Humor me," Blake said, kissing her forehead. "Besides, you'll be glad of the help when the baby comes." He was right, of course. As summer gave way to autumn and Sarah's belly grew round with their child, she found herself grateful for Jenny's assistance with laundry and heavier cleaning tasks. The girl was a cheerful presence in the house, teaching Emma songs and games from town, while helping Sarah preserve the garden's bounty for winter. October brought cattle roundup, the busiest time of the ranch year. Blake and the men were gone from dawn until well after dusk, gathering cattle from the far pastures, counting, branding the late calves, and preparing the herd for winter. Sarah missed Blake's presence in the house, but understood the necessity of the work. On the third night of roundup, a storm blew in from the mountains and early snow that coated the land in white and sent temperatures plunging. Sarah paced the floor worriedly. Knowing Blake and the men were camped miles from the house. "Will Papa be all right?" Emma asked as Sarah tucked her into bed, Flower curled at her feet as always. "Of course," Sarah assured her, with more confidence than she felt. "Papa knows what to do in snow. He and the men will keep each other warm and safe." It was nearly midnight when Sarah heard horses in the yard. She hurried to the door, lantern in hand, to find Blake dismounting, his face ruddy with cold, snowflakes melting in his hair and beard. "You're safe," she breathed, relief washing through her. "Told the men to head for the line cabin when the storm hit," he explained, stamping snow from his boots before entering. "It was closer than riding home, but I couldn't stay there knowing you'd be worried." "You rode all that way in the storm? Blake, you could have frozen. Worth it to see your face." He pulled her close, his clothes cold against her, but his body radiating warmth beneath. "How's our little one?" Sarah guided his hand to her rounded belly. "Active tonight. Feel." Blake's expression softened as he felt the baby kick against his palm. "Strong," he murmured, "like its mama." The remainder of the pregnancy passed without complications, though the increasing cold and snow of winter kept Sarah closer to home than she would have liked. Blake insisted on accompanying her whenever she needed to go to town, unwilling to risk her traveling alone so close to her time. Christmas was a quieter affair than the previous year, with Sarah too uncomfortable for elaborate celebrations, but no less joyful. Emma was delighted with her gifts: new books, a doll's cradle Blake had made, warm clothes for the winter, and the knowledge that a sibling would soon join their family. The baby arrived on a crystal-clear January night in 1889. After a labor that lasted from midday until just past midnight, Mrs. Finch and Doc Patterson attended, with Blake pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door, periodically called in by Mrs. Finch to hold Sarah's hand through the worst contractions. "It's a boy," Doc Patterson announced finally, as a lusty cry filled the room. "A fine, healthy boy." Blake, permitted to enter once Sarah was cleaned up and the baby swaddled, approached the bed with reverence in his eyes. Sarah, exhausted but radiant, held out the small bundle. "Meet your son, Blake." Blake took the infant with hands that trembled slightly, staring down at the tiny red face with its shock of dark hair. "He's perfect," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Sarah, he's perfect." They named him Benjamin Thomas Sullivan. Benjamin for Blake's father, Thomas in memory of Sarah's first husband, a gesture of reconciliation with the past that touched Sarah deeply. Emma, aloud in the next morning, was enchanted with her baby brother. "He's so small," she marveled, gently touching his tiny fingers. "And his hair is dark like Papa's." "He'll need his big sister to help take care of him," Blake told her seriously. "Think you can handle that responsibility?" Emma nodded, her expression solemn. "I'll be the best big sister ever." As Sarah watched her family, Blake holding Benjamin with tender care, Emma leaning against his side to better see her brother, she felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. From the depths of despair in Chicago, she had found her way to this moment, this perfect fullness of joy. "What are you thinking?" Blake asked, noticing her tears. "That I'm the luckiest woman in Montana," Sarah replied honestly. "That day I stepped off the train with nothing but hope and Emma. I never imagined how much I would gain." Blake's eyes, warm with love, held hers across the room. You didn't arrive with nothing, Sarah. You brought everything that matters. He looked down at Benjamin, then at Emma. You brought love into this house. You made it a home. As winter gradually loosened its grip on the land, giving way to the first tentative signs of spring, the Sullivan family settled into new rhythms around the baby. Benjamin proved to be a good-natured infant, with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. Emma took her role as big sister seriously, helping Sarah with small tasks and singing to Benjamin when he was fussy. By the summer of 1889, Sullivan's Rest was thriving, not just the ranch with its expanding herd and well-maintained buildings, but the family that gave it life and purpose. As Sarah stood on the porch one evening, watching Blake teach Emma to throw a lasso while Benjamin slept in her arms, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The mail-order bride who had arrived with nothing but hope and a child had found far more than she'd ever dared to dream. A husband who had become the love of her life, a home filled with warmth and purpose, and a future as vast and promising as the Montana sky above them. She had brought hope, yes, and a child. But Blake had been right all along in bringing those. She had brought everything that truly mattered.